Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage. And someone will say his career can never be saved. Despite all his rage, he's still just Nicolas Cage.
Hey guys, welcome to another installment of Just Nicolas Cage, where I slowly work my way through Nicolas Cage's filmography. Today I'm talking about the final part of the Nick Cage 90s action holy trinity, the 1997 film FaceOff. So in FaceOff, Nick Cage plays Castor Troy, a psychopathic killer who plants a bomb in LA. FBI agent Sean Archer, played by John Travolta, apprehends him and puts him in a coma. Travolta needs to find out where the bomb is, so he undergoes a face-swapping procedure to look like Cage so he can trick Cage's brother into telling him where the bomb is. Meanwhile, Cage wakes up with no face and gets Travolta's face put on him, and hijinks ensue. You know, when I think of badass gunfights in movies, there's a certain gentleman that comes to mind. I'll give you a clue. His first name is John and his surname begins with a W. Of course, I'm talking about John Wick. Don't kill his dog or he'll shoot your ass. But the other gentleman that comes to mind is Hong Kong director John Woo. If you've seen his Hong Kong action film from the 80s and early 90s, you'll know that this man knows how to make guns look cool. You've got Chow Yun-fat sliding around the place shooting, and guys are jumping through the air with two pistols like Max Payne. His style is iconic, and his early films are just the epitome of cool. If you haven't seen any of his films, I recommend Hard Boiled and The Killer. They're awesome. But I also want to give a quick shout out to A Better Tomorrow 2, which I wouldn't really call a great movie. It's kind of a hot mess, but I also enjoy it. It stars Chow Yun-fat as the twin brother of the character he played in the first movie that was killed off at the end, which is something I think I've only ever seen done in like over-the-top parody movies. But man, is the last action scene in this movie so goddamn good. It's 3 guys against a house full of like 100 bad guys, and it's really impressive. I mean, look at the way John Woo utilizes space. Guy gets shot in the foreground, guy goes flying through the air in the middle for some reason, and a guy gets shot in the background. And all in the space of a few seconds without panning or zooming in. But unfortunately, when John Woo came to Hollywood, the magic got lost a little bit, and he didn't have quite the success that he did in Hong Kong. I haven't seen a lot of his American films, but he directed what's generally regarded as the worst Mission Impossible movie, and the poorly received war movie Windtalkers, which stars Nicolas Cage, so I guess I've got to watch that in 8 movies' time. But there's one Hollywood movie that John Woo made that most people can agree is pretty awesome, and that's FaceOff. And it's got John Woo's fingerprints all over it. You got guys diving through the air while holding 2 guns like I mentioned earlier. There's slow motion. I mean, it feels like a third of this movie is in slow-mo. There's a shootout in a church like in The Killer. And they put headphones on a kid so he doesn't hear the gunfire, like how Chow Yun-fat puts cotton in the baby's ears in Hard Boiled. And of course you've got doves. Suffice to say it's very John Woo-ish. And the action is fantastic. That airport scene is good enough to be the climax in any other movie, but it's the opening scene of this. Not to mention that whole kick-ass boat sequence near the end. But hang on, I feel like I've gotten ahead of myself. We're 3 minutes into my review about a movie about face-swapping, and I've brushed over the face-swapping aspect like that's totally normal. What am I doing here? So let's talk about it. Yeah, the whole conceit about 2 guys swapping faces is absurd. It does take a fair bit of suspension of disbelief to get over. But what's interesting is that originally the movie was going to be set 100 years in the future, I guess to justify the face-swapping technology. Apparently the early script also involved flying cars and chimpanzees that carried out manual labor. But when John Woo got involved, he wanted to ground it and set it in modern day. Except that it's 1997 and there's apparently technology that can perfectly alter a guy's face and create an ear via a laser, and there's magnet boots that look like something out of Ratchet and Clank. I am glad that they got rid of that whole futuristic sci-fi element. I think it's more fun that it's not set in the future. But I'm also kind of upset that we were deprived of a Nicolas Cage movie that involved monkey slaves. It is a fairly original idea though. I don't think there's been a face-swapping movie before or after. But it does kind of remind me of like a Freaky Friday scenario. You know, one of those movies where 2 people from very different walks of life end up swapping bodies, usually through some sort of unexplained voodoo. And they often end up understanding each other better by literally walking in each other's shoes. You've seen that in countless movies, like The Hot Chick, The Change-Up, A Boy Thing, A Girl Thing.
13 on 30!
Detention!
Face-Off!
Right. Actually, no, face-off wouldn't work because that's a face-switching movie.
Yeah.
Alright, Dennis is right. It is a face-switching movie, not a body-switching movie. But Face-Off does fall into a lot of tropes of a Freaky Friday scenario. To me, one of the most interesting parts of the movie are the small little insights that Sean Archer and Castor Troy get into each other's lives. Castor Troy has to visit the grave of the boy that he killed, and he genuinely looks quite affected by that. And he even bonds with the daughter a little bit when he's not being creepy. He teaches her how to protect herself. And Sean Archer gains a bit of insight into Castor Troy's relationships, like with his brother and Gina Gershon and their son. That's pretty Freaky Friday-ish. Although I do kind of wish the movie embraced that aspect a bit more. Especially because John Woo's movies do often have that theme of two characters from very different walks of life coming to a mutual understanding. Like in The Killer, you have a hitman and a cop who form a beautiful friendship in the third act. If I was to rewrite FaceOff, I would lean into that a bit more. Like Castor Troy sees the error of his ways by being confronted by the ramification of his actions. And I guess it would be a bit of a stretch to say that Sean Archer ends up forgiving Castor Troy because he did kill his son. That's a tough hurdle to get over. But maybe it'd be interesting that, like, right around when Castor Troy is starting to feel bad, that bald guy with the earring ends up going rogue and, like, taking Sean Archer's daughter or wife hostage. And Castor Troy feels bad and sacrifices himself. But of course, by the end of the actual movie, Castor Troy seems to have learned no lessons whatsoever, and that's pretty awesome too. So I've subtly alluded to it a couple of times, but we've got to talk about that face waterfall thing. Yeah, multiple times in the movie, John Travolta runs his hand down the face of his loved one in a really weird way. And yeah, it's weird and off-putting, but I don't have much to say about it outside of that. But funnier people than me have covered it far better than I ever will, so I'll let them just make fun of it.
Picture any girlfriend you're dating. Picture if your move was to go goodbye, and then take your fingers and brush them over the center of her face. She would hate that.
If John Travolta wiped my face in a scene in an improvisational way, I would be like, get the fuck away from me.
It's pretty fun to look at all the actors that were considered for the two lead roles in the movie, which included Harrison Ford and Michael Douglas, Bruce Willis and Alec Baldwin, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal, Denzel Washington and Wesley Snipes, and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Which, man, I wish I had one of those Rick and Morty interdimensional cable setups, so I could watch the different timelines when all of those movies existed. I mean, imagine Schwarzenegger doing Stallone's mannerisms and vice versa. It would have been incredible. But I'm glad we got what we got. Two of the biggest over-actors of the 90s that fully understood the assignment. Let's start with Cage. I saw an interview with Nicolas Cage where he talked about how he watched the John Woo movie Bullet in the Head and saw that a lot of actors were doing operatic facial expressions. And that gave him the go-ahead to do something similar and channel his performance from Vampire's Kiss. I haven't seen Bullet in the Head, but yeah, I kind of know what he means. In a lot of Asian movies, you do often get these kind of over-the-top performances. And I think that's what Cage was trying to tap into, and he really goes for it here. Before Castor Troy gets his face swapped, you get some fantastic Nicolas Cage moments. He's playing a total creep and he's dialed up to 11 and it's really entertaining. You have him headbanging while in disguise as a priest. You've got that whole peach thing.
You know, I can eat a peach for hours.
And I love that part with him singing.
Well, I think you better pull the trigger, because I don't give a fuck. I'm ready for the big ride, baby!
I'm guessing that Nicolas Cage knew that for the brunt of the movie he was gonna have to play this, like, good guy, depressed family man. So at the start he got in as much chaotic craziness as he could. It is always kind of a shame when he does dial it back eventually, but obviously it makes sense for the plot. Although you do still have a few fun Nicolas Cage moments post-face swap. In terms of Nicolas Cage, like, handling John Travolta's mannerisms, I don't know if he fully nails it, but to be fair, he definitely had the harder job of the two. It's hard to do Travolta unless you fully go, yeah, Sandy. And as much as I would have loved to see Cage do that, I don't think it would have worked. But what I do think Nicolas Cage nails is the inner torment and confliction of a good guy pretending to be a bad guy. I mean, that pained laugh he does says a lot. And now on to John Travolta, and he's awesome here. He really embraces Nicolas Cage's voice and mannerisms. He does a genuinely great job.
You good looking. You're hot. Wow. Looks like you're gonna be in here for the next 100 years.
I do really like that Travolta fully commits. And you can tell he's having a blast. And why wouldn't he be? He's getting paid to pretend to be Nicolas Cage. I would pay money to do that all day. Overall, this movie is insane. There's so many ridiculous parts where you just go, why? And I don't know if it's technically a good movie, but I love it. I saw that it has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 92%, which is higher than the vast majority of Academy Award winning movies, by the way. But I think it boils down to, as ludicrous as this movie is, it's entertaining as all hell. You've got top-class action coming from a great director. and 2 actors giving it their absolute all. And even the strange idiosyncrasies and face waterfalls all bring a undeniable amount of charm to the film. Yeah, you've got to suspend your disbelief, but if you do, you'll have a great time. So that's been the Cage Holy Trinity, and man, it's been a lot of fun to rewatch these movies and talk about them. I think if I was ranking them, I would go Con Air, FaceOff, The Rock, but all 3 are great. Definitely watch them if you haven't already. So the next movie Nicolas Cage did is City of Angels. So until next time, guys, thanks for watching.